how this actually, how much it means to you personally.
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, Port Huron to be exact, and as a young kid growing up while this was happening, so when the limousine accident happened, it really stuck in my memory. As a storyteller, I knew it was an incredible story. When I was 19, I was in a car accident and I broke my spine. And so I had 3 surgeries over the course of 6 years. And between the second and third surgery, I was depressed, despondent. My grandparents got me Constantine Rogers. So for me, it was sort of this like lightning rod of like, what I'm going through sucks, but what Vladdy went through was much, much worse, and he persevered through with a smile on his face. So I knew I wanted to tell this story to share his inspiration to me. So I got better, I moved down to Austin, went to film school at the University of Texas, and I was working with the director, Al Reiner, who one day asked me, actually we were driving from Houston to Corsicana, what's the story you want to tell? And I told him about the story of the Russian 5, and he was just like, Joshua, you have to tell this story. So a couple months later, or actually a couple weeks later, I started writing handwritten letters to everyone involved in the story. And Jim was the first person who got back to me. He said, if you're still in Austin, why don't you drive up I-35 and let's have a conversation. Luckily for me, this was during the last NHL lockout. So I did. I drove up and I kind of pitched him the story and what I wanted to do. And Jim got excited. He gave me Jim Delano's phone number. So when I was home for Christmas that year, I called Jimmy D and Ken Holland. I met Ken Holland at Barnes & Noble while his daughter dropped them off so she could go Christmas shopping. And I pitched him the story, and Ken got really excited. I said, whatever you need, the organization has your back. So the next year was the Winter Classic, and I said, hey Ken, I need your help. I need to meet the Russians. So he basically gave me a press pass and gave me an opportunity to pitch the film to the Russians. To my surprise, all 4 of them, obviously Vladdy can't really communicate or make the decision for himself, but Sergey, Slava, and Igor said, yeah, we'll do this. And that was about 6.5, almost 7 years ago. So it was a long process. I moved back to Detroit to really get the money and really make this film, but it's an honor to bring it back here and share it with Jim and everyone else here in Dallas. Really kind of where the film started. So thank you all for coming.
So Jim, so you were kind of the star of the beginning of the movie. You were obviously up there a lot. When you said you were really scared at one point. When you're doing all that, you're going to Budapest, you're going to Moscow, you're going to all these places. Are you really processing you can't see the potential. You see the potential, but the outcome isn't really. What's going through your mind at that point?
Well, what's not in the film is in 1985. When the Cold War was on really hard, and it was much more dangerous to communicate with people behind the Iron Curtain. I'd only been in the job about 2 years, and we engineered the defection of a Czech player named Peter Klima. Many of you probably, if you're older rugby fans, you would know. And that was a much scarier process than the Russians. I never had to go, but it was easier to do. We did the Russian players, ironically, for the most part, Fedorov particularly, the first one, was done in the United States. We had contacted him in Europe, but it wasn't as scary a proposition. So we had done it about 6 years before. We had Nick Polano, who you saw in the movie, he and I went to Germany, and literally, the Czech team was being guarded by Russian military. The first time they had ever trained outside the Iron Curtain. And we, literally the second day they ever were practicing, we coaxed Peter Klima to get in the car with us and leave. It's a long kind of story. But that was really coaxing people. There were armed guards with them. So this seemed easy comparatively. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's hard to describe other than Mr. Illich gave us unbelievable resources. I worked with Jimmy Devellano and Kenny Holland. Jim Nill, our general manager, you guys, was 15 years as the Stars general manager now, was 15 years the assistant to Ken Holland and Jimmy Devellano in Detroit is a disciple of theirs. These guys were real, they knew what to do, they knew what it took to win. that was kind of driving the whole force behind it. I really just coordinated the effort, quite frankly. Where do you go? How do you get money? Who do you talk to? And you know, money really mattered in every one of these situations. There was significant, cash involved in making these things happen, because that's the culture there and what you have to do to make things happen in Russia. You know, right or wrong, that's what mattered. It mattered to the guys. More importantly, it mattered to all the people we had to convince and things we had to do to get them to come. From bribing doctors on Konstantinov to paying cab drivers to take us. Didn't make the movie, but the first time I met Vladimir Konstantinov was in the middle of the night in Turku, Finland, where he was playing for the Red Army team. And we had Fedorov out, and we basically figured that Vladdy would be disinterested. And the guy that helped us get Fedorov out, the interpreter, the photographer for the Russian national team, kind of came to us. And I was there to sign Nick Lidstrom to his first contract. And I got told, well, if you want to meet Vladimir Konstantinov, and we said, sure. We had to pay the cab driver $100. He drove us out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally in the middle of nowhere. And here's Vlad. It's about 40 degrees. It's May in Finland. You're just below the Arctic Circle. And Vlad is out there in a really thin, tracksuit. And he was just, we thought he'd be, fully Russianized. I don't want to come. He was just the opposite. Of all the guys, he had the best personality. He had the most, he was, really a great person. And from that, I got to be friends with his wife and his child before I left to come to Dallas. And he was just the best to work with. But he was out there saying to us, I can't believe I have to get my family out, but I'll do anything to make that happen. And we were able to make that happen, about 5 or 6 months later. So there was those kinds of things, and it was all about resources.
Were there a lot of people in the organization that were just, or was there anybody who was just saying, you guys are effing crazy, what the hell are you doing, this is stupid? And obviously the powers that be were, the ones that were okay with it, so that's all that really mattered, but was there anybody who just was,
Yeah, maybe. I don't want to get into it much. My ex-wife. My children are here, so. I had very young children. My daughter was 1 when we went and got Klima. I was 4 weeks out of the country, hiding out with Peter Klima in West Germany. And then when we did Fedorov and the guys, that was my son, Sam, who's here now, works for us after 8 years with the Red Wings. He's now a Dallas Stars scout management guy. And Sammy was 1 when we got Fedorov. In fact, there's a really cute story. So Sergei Fedorov came to live with us for 3 weeks after the Portland leaving. He came to the house, and we didn't have any plan. There was nowhere to go. So you saw a young man there, Mike, was my assistant's cousin, because we needed a guy. The player comes with us, and that kind of becomes, now what? Right? He needed someone that could speak Russian. So my assistant's cousin was Russian, and he spoke, so you saw him in the movie. Mike comes in, and then the 2 of them moved into the house. And Sam Lights was 1 at the time. And I remember 3 or 4 years later, when I was preparing to leave to go to Dallas, Sergei came over to the house for a reason. And I remember Sam by that time was maybe 2 or 3. And Sergei, who spoke perfect English, reaches down, because understand, Sam Lights' hero, Sergei Fedorov. And Sam's there looking at him, and Sergei reaches down and goes, Sam, so good to see you. Last time I was here, either one of us could speak English.
Question for the director or producer. When you're making a movie like this, what part of it, sports docs are fascinating to me because you're always doing the backdrop of sports, but then you're trying to connect the human element to that. We talked about this a little bit before. Like when throughout the process, there's a lot of, you could have done a lot more of the second year, outside of Vlad. You could could have went through some more games and any kind of ups and downs. You could have cut the pre-Stanley Cup years a little bit shorter. But when you're telling the story, what's the most important thing about like connecting audiences that might not really know that much about hockey? Maybe they grew up in Detroit, or maybe not even, that can compel them to, you know, watch this movie and actually be interested.
Yeah, so when I started making this movie, I knew I wanted to make it not a hockey film, but a film about people going through these interesting things that just happen to be hockey as their profession. So I don't know if you noticed, but you don't actually see a hockey play in this movie until like 25 minutes into the film. I wanted to root the audience into the stories of these guys and the risks that you guys took to get them out and the risks that they took to come here. I figure as a storyteller, if we can do that, if we can make the audience care about them before we even drop a puck, then if you don't care about hockey, you'll go on the journey anyways. And if you do care about hockey, by that point, you're gonna be like, well, when are you gonna show the goddamn hockey? So, it was a win-win for us, I think, to make that approach.
So you grew up in Detroit, so you're up this, you know you have all these things rooted in your brain, like how important. You're working for the Red Wings, like how do you kind of grasp how important it is for the city to get the title? How do you?
Josh came to me with this idea, and I've got to tell you, other people had come to us about the story before. Keith Gave, I don't know if people know this, but Keith Gave followed Tim Kalishaw into the Post as the Stars beat writer right after they won the Cup here. So Keith and I had a relationship that continued when we were in Dallas. And Keith, one of the things that Josh did right off the bat was connect with Keith, which was really key because Keith did act as an interpreter, did make the first connection with the Russian players on our behalf. But by that time, Keith is in Dallas and working here as the beat writer. So there's kind of a crazy connection between everybody. But Josh had a vision and would basically come in and say, well, I want to do this, but I don't have any money, which is always going to be a problem in any type of project like this. And I said, well, it's going to be tough to do because in order to do it right, you really have to have you're going to have to put resources into it to be able to talk to the Russians. And, they're all over the place now. Slava Kozlov, was back playing in Russia. And Fedorov had gone back and was part of the Russian Hockey Ice Federation. This is in the 2000s. And, it was a really tough thing. But he stuck with it really, really well. And when I first started seeing, I remember my interviews with him were in two parts. I think we took a long interview in Frisco at our headquarters building several years ago, and then I followed up with quite a long follow-up after we'd gotten everything together in Detroit when we were up there I was up there for games, I think. And I could tell by the time, in the years that had elapsed between the first time I was interviewed and the end, he had gotten really, really incredible. He'd gotten resources and had great access to everybody that mattered in it. And what I love about the film is I went to law school. I moved to Detroit to go to school. Went to law school there. Got lucky, got involved, and engaged with the Red Wings. It became kind of my own passion for this. I've had a career now of it over 36 years in the sports business. But I cut my teeth on trying to work in the city where I kind of adopted Detroit as my home. I didn't grow up there, but I got there, and it's great to see all of that because Detroit was a really difficult place, a hard place for people living there, and I think Josh in the film captured all that it meant, what the Red Wings became and meant to the city, and back in the 80s and the 90s, it was really, really well done. And while I moved out of there to start the 93-94 season, what's really funny to understand is the last year when they won the Cup the second time, we the Stars were President's Trophy winners that year. And because Joe Nieuwendyk got hurt, they beat us in 6 games. I'm sorry. And the following year, we won the Cup by beating Colorado with the same cast of characters in '99, and then beat them again in 2000 before we were beaten by the Devils in 2000. So there was a continuity between, in fact, my children, Brooke and Sam, they got to go in, they were in 3 Stanley Cup parades in a row. They started to think that that's what you did every year. 2 in Detroit and 1 in Dallas. So anyway, it's for me, I can tell you that it was a really fun time in my life and career. I really enjoyed all that went on. But I've enjoyed helping Josh tell this story, and he did a fantastic job. And I'm really proud to be part of it, and proud that it's here in Dallas playing in my hometown now. So there you go.
So we got some t-shirts. Check out on our website.
Thanks, guys. Does anybody have any questions?
There's 2. Yeah, you're in a great shirt. Yeah, go ahead. Stand up and kind of be loud.
Did you guys get any pressure from the State Department, and also if you were worried that the KGB was going to take you all out?
Yes, to the first question. Significant pressure. The Goodwill games were threatened because Fedorov defected and left the day before the Goodwill games were opening in 1991. The Goodwill games were kind of a concoction of Ted Turner, TBS, TNT, of great fame. They were the big superstation, and they created this whole series of kind of fake Olympics, for lack of a better term, that year were being played in Seattle and Portland. And there was pressure because the Russians were threatening to not, because Fedorov left, they were threatening to back out of the Goodwill games. Didn't seem to me to be realistic much, but like I said, we didn't plan anything. Like, we went there hoping he would come with us, but he said he would, but it's one of those things you never know till you know. Until he got into the car with us, we didn't really know if he was coming. So we had made no plans on what to do next, other than we had we had immigration lawyers waiting on staff to help us because we'd done it with Klima back in the 80s. So we kind of knew what to do, but the State Department was that those conversations were kind of ugly. But to be quite honest, no different than now. What matters to me is what the owner thinks, and the owner was way on board. And the player Sergei had no intention of going back. He had done it right. He didn't leave with us to go to Chicago when we were in Chicago 6 months earlier. He did it after he got out of the military, so he didn't have a visa. He didn't have a visa issue. He was a very smart guy. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he had no intention of going anywhere. And then, 3 days later, it was kaput. It was over. It wasn't going to be an issue. KGB, I guess it's probably a bigger issue now, quite frankly, than it was then. Because during Perestroika, the institutions in the Soviet Union at that time in the early 90s were crumbling. I don't think we ever worried about it then. It might be a bigger issue now because of Putin.
There was another question right behind. Yeah.
So I Jen, this is for you. It's kind of a little off topic, but I was at the game back in December when the Wings came to town. This was coincidentally 2 days after your comments about Sagan and Ben. I don't want to get too far into that, but the timing was very coincidental. I just want to know if that was, an incident of you lighting a spark under them at the right times. You definitely got the better of us that game. So I was curious about that.
Is that to me, I guess?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I promised myself I wouldn't get into this. Yes, and I will tell you, I will say this. We expect to win. We want to win here. I bring the same passion to this business today on behalf of the Stars that I've had my entire career. I have luckily got a ring from the '97 Stanley Cup from the Red Wings. Mr. Illich, even though I was here working for the enemy, gave me a ring that year, and I have one from '99. That passion still exists. It existed then. I will tell you that in my 36 years of professional sports, I've never done it before, and it'll be 36 more years before it ever happens again. And I will say this, the players have responded beautifully to that situation, which is all we care about. I may not, as I said in the paper, ever be invited to their children's weddings, but I respect how they've responded, both guys. And more importantly, what we were really excited about is how the team has gelled around the coach. Part of the biggest problem I felt at the time was I was worried at the level of respect the rookie coach was getting from the veteran players in our room, and the exact thing that we wanted to see happen, which was for the players to kind of get behind you. The theme of that story is how those Russian players and their system and the North American response to it, right? What happened in the locker room to the team and how the team responded to it. And what I love is that our team has responded really well. Jim Montgomery's grown up, I think, in the process, and he's now doing a really good job with our team. And but I take no credit for it because I was just delivering a message that I think needed to be done, and I was the right person to do it because of my gray hair and experience, and the fact that I do not have to deal with the players every day. Jim Nill has trouble. Him and the GM, the coach, they got to deal with players every day, and the owner's the owner. So he shouldn't get wade in there that deep. I'm the right person to deliver a message, and whether but at the same time, I think you're overplaying if you think that what I said had that much to do with how we're playing. I just think it's something that occurs in the course of an emotional time around teams. Different things happen to make teams come together. Hopefully that's going to happen to us, and we'll see. But more importantly, the players have done a beautiful job of handling it, reacting the right way, basically. And as I said at the time, I hope they chanted right down my throat.
What was it like working with Scotty Bowman? Fun?
This is going to sound ironic. I never worked with Scotty. I left in 93, 94 to come here. They hired Scotty that summer. I was already in Dallas. Now, I know Scotty really well from my many years, pre and post. Him being with Detroit, I knew Scotty before he moved to Detroit, and I knew him after. I was way on board with him on making that hire, because they needed a coach to be able to handle all those personalities. And he's the best, greatest of all time. But I never worked with him, which is ironic. I moved here.
What was the thought process behind Pavel Datsyuk not being included in this document?
He wasn't on the team then.
Yeah, Pavel didn't come into the league
Well, I mean,
until...
he's Russian, and he, was obviously probably influenced by the other players. Like, he could have been a really good person.
Yeah, Pavel, the story really stops in 1998, and Pavel didn't come into the league until 2002. So for us, it wasn't really relevant to dig into.
Well, he's a great
player.
player.
I'm sure he had amazing things to say about what they meant to him as a young Russian coming in, and his first season in the league was, Igor was on that team, and Igor and Brayden immediately took Pavel under his wing, taught him so much. But for the sake of this story, we wanted to contain it to, who was there when it happened.
All the way in the back, you had a question a while ago. Yes.
So, you allude to it in the movie, and I remember how it was when Sergei defected. So you had to listen to Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday night. I'm sure he was very critical of the Red Wings. So during that period, though, when you were bringing these players in, was there a lot of conflict in the Red Wings locker room from some of the Canadian players because of the focus on trying to bring all these players in from Europe?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely, you guys. Was really a big deal. You've got to understand, when I started the business, my first season was 1982, 83. The Red Wings were awful. They'd been awful. If you can imagine, they were kind of in bankruptcy. I mean, they were worthless, which is hard to imagine, right? But the feeling and impression always was Swedes. There were almost no Finns, a few Swedes, no Russians because they couldn't come over, and there was just an impression that Europeans didn't have the cojones, the courage, the balls to play the sport the right way, It seemed, but in international competition, the Russians were unbeatable. I look at, they won every Olympics, every, the Super Series occurred, the 72, 73 Super Series was unbelievable. They played in the 80s. I remember Bob Gainey, our former coach GM, was what made his career, winning a Super Series, being the captain of the Canadian team in that go-around. So there, I think there was an impression that they were going to really they could make a difference, and over time they would. And look at it now. I mean, talk about, I know they didn't like it because they were losing jobs. Even Eiserman was chilly, very chilly at first, to the thought of Sergei Fedorov coming in here. And Fedorov adored him. Fedorov took 91 because Steve Eisman was 19. Fedorov would he thought Eisman would walk down water. Steve was 10 years into his career when Sergei got there, 8 years into his career. So, there was animosity in general. Nobody articulated it like Don Cherry. Every day, all the time, ad infinitum. And he still kind of does, quite frankly. He's still got that attitude a bit. We just don't have to watch it much down here, which is good.
One thing that some of the guys talked about is, with Klima coming in, Klima had a lot of expectation. Here's this flashy European with long blonde hair, and he kind of fizzled out. So some of the guys said when Sergei came into the locker room, there was just like, oh, here we go again. Didn't you guys learn the lesson? But the second Sergei stepped on the ice, was the guys who knew their jobs were safe pretty quickly were like, well, he's going to make us better.
Oh yeah, Darren McCarty is a great example of the guy, right, that would be most threatened, right, an enforcer type, 12-goal guy, but blood and sweat and tears and lived and died it every day. Great teammate, great guy. I remember when he came down to the draft table, he was a second round pick of the Red Wings in the early '80s, and you could, Jimmy leaned over to me going, can this kid fight? I mean, that kind of thing. And they'd be the worst, but once these Russians were different. They were better. Peter Klima was an unbelievable talent that you guys probably saw. Won the cup in Edmonton after he was traded. But he had a bad alcohol problem when he was younger. He ran pretty hard, and was it was a good person, but wasn't a great character hockey player. Didn't pay the price the way these guys did. The Russians are really unique and great. And that team, the guy that's the most important guy in that team was Nick Lidstrom. Was a Swedish guy who, was second best defenseman in history. Hopefully our guy is going to, I like it when people say to me now, Miro Heiskanen is Nick Lidstrom. So.
Family members that left, or that were left in Russia, did anything happen to them? Were they ever blacklisted, or do we know if they were?
So Sergei alluded to, there was a little bit of weirdness, but nothing overt. And his family came over pretty quickly.
Oh yeah,
like
his father was a former athlete. I can't remember when. I think he was a hockey player. Sergei's younger brother played in the league, and his father was an Olympian. I think a hockey player, but he might have been even a different sport, swimming or diving or something. I don't think they faced much. I think there might have been issues at times about kind of the mafia making, kind of extorting them a bit, not the government that I'm aware of, but I think there were issues about, hey, you're making a lot of money now, how about a little something for the house?
What about when they would go back, like in the off season, or just when they go back a lot? Like,
no, not for a while.
They didn't go back initially until the wall was completely down.
Yeah.
Once the wall was down and everything was normalized and all that was done, but I don't think for the first 3 or 4 years that any of them went back.
Sergei didn't go back until the lockout in '94, '95, when they actually put together a good world tour, and Slava Fetisov got Sergei and Alex McGillney's passports back for them. So that was the first time those two were able to return back to Russia. So,
Yeah.
Okay, we got time for one more. Yeah.
Question. When you guys were doing all these, when you got these defective players to start playing, did any of the other clubs start calling the Red Wings to figure out how are you guys doing this? And
Right.
I know they really was, because they thought that they were soft, but obviously you were getting some of these good players that come in, and I was just wondering if the Red Wings and the other owners, where they were trying to figure out, like, how are they doing this? Because no one had really never done it before.
Yes. And no, we didn't tell them. It's a really competitive business. I mean, what really happened, you guys, was that this team got built in 2 drafts. No Russian player had been drafted higher than the 7th round in any NHL draft. We took Fedorov in the 4th. And here's an untold story. Jimmy D wouldn't be happy with me telling you this. Neil Smith, who was our chief scout and went on to win the cup with the New York Rangers. You saw him in some of the pictures around the draft table. Neil wanted to take another guy in the 5th round of that 89 draft, Pavel Bure. And there was a question about Bure's eligibility, because at that time you had to be, you had to be a certain age, you had a certain amount of experience. And Jimmy D said no. And I was there, and he said, "I'm not taking any more fucking Russians." I gave you one, okay? And Jimmy, like, we all do it, but it was hard. That was his attitude. Like, so I love Jimmy, but he was less pro-Russian until he got because nobody thought you could get him out. Nobody thought you could get him out. That was the issue, right? And so we got him, and then. But back then there was an 11-round draft. And at the end, we're at the very end of the draft, and the guy said, there was no names left. And they said, well, what about the only Russian player that's out there is Vladimir Konstantinov, who's captain of the Russian team. And we kind of gave it well, what the hell? We'll hold his rights for 10 years, and by then maybe they'll sell him to us. We got him out 2 years later. The following draft, we took North American players in the first 2 rounds, and Kozlov, who Jimmy loved the way he played because he'd seen him as a 15-year-old. But Slava didn't get much bigger, so he wasn't as significant a player as Fedorov. But he always loved the Kozlov's name, and Jimmy wanted to take Kozlov his first year of eligibility, and he was the highest Russian ever taken in the 90 draft. So the 89 and 90 drafts were all. By 91, everybody's taking Russians. So, the cat was out of the bag. By then, Sergei Zubov's going in the 3rd round. So
Kovalev was the #1 overall a couple of years later.
Yeah, Kovalev went early. So by then, it was done. We just got to the party earlier by 2 years than everybody else.
All right, guys, thank you very much for coming out.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Start.